Hello, and welcome to Flunking the Written, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans discuss their favorite show, episode by episode, scene by scene. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Megan, and before we get started, we want all of our listeners to know that this is a fully spoiled podcast. That means at any point during our discussion, we may bring up any part of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and its spinoff, Angel.
So if you haven't watched both shows and are sensitive to spoilers, go catch up on some of the greatest television ever created and come back here when you're done.
With that out of the way, let's jump right into this week's episode of Flunking the Written. Alright, so we're back again, ready to discuss Teacher's Pet, the fourth episode of Season 1, and a monumental episode, I must say. It is definitely in a lot of top 10 Buffy lists. Unfortunately, it is in the top 10 worst episodes of Buffy lists. Not one of my favorites. How about you, Kim?
No, it's not gonna make the first 25 or so favorites at all.
Once you get into the 30s, then there might be some room for negotiation.
Maybe. I'd have to work out that list.
So the funny thing about this episode, though, is it has quite a bit of heavy names attached to it. You got David Greenwalt as the writer, and then directed by Bruce Seth Green, which are both pretty prominent names in the Buffyverse. And this is their first episode to work on in the Buffyverse, and man, it has got some rough edges, but these two have definitely produced much better material than this. So we'll still give them props for their contribution to Buffy, but this is a rough start for them. So in my continued enjoyment of reading the episodes blurbs on the DVD backs, I'm going to go ahead and read this one. The summary given for this episode is: Xander falls for a beautiful substitute teacher who is actually a she-mantis intent on mating with, then decapitating virginal boys. So they're just...
accurate.
Yeah, they're just laying it all out there, aren't they? They're not...
Yeah.
They're giving you the entire episode. So we're going to start at the bronze, as you do, with a lovely zoom out from a mouth. A lovely screaming mouth, and Buffy is fighting a vamp in a silk red dress of all things.
Well, while this is actually a dream sequence, and that becomes obvious pretty quickly, she's fought vampires in things close to that before.
Yeah.
Formal gowns and leather pants and some things you just wouldn't think were conducive to fighting vampires and winning.
Yeah.
So that's not too much of a stretch for me.
And I understand that there are times where she's already in that outfit and wasn't planning on fighting vamps, but I've seen her go, like, patrolling in outfits that I'm just like, that is not practical, girl. Why? You knew what you were doing tonight.
Oh, yeah. She likes to patrol in heels.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, really?
So Buffy is fighting this vamp, and Xander steps in to save the day and promises Buffy a kiss after he finishes his solo. And this is where it's really obvious that it's a dream. But it continues. He walks away, stakes the vampire through breaking off a stake and flinging it through the air, and then goes up to play guitar. And Buffy approaches. She's very enticing.
Yes, very much.
Buffy's very enticing look as she walks up, and it's just like, you're drooling in just the sexiest way that Buffy could say it.
Yeah. Well, and Xander his character is this goofy, awkward with the girls, kind of geeky type character.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays that really, really well. But this scene kind of shows he can play other things.
Yeah.
That he is a talented actor, because Nicholas Brennan does a really good job playing the smooth, cool guy during this. I mean, it's over the top, but I mean, he's pretty smooth.
Yeah, he does a good job at it, and he's super new to acting. That's one thing that, if you ever watch any interviews with Nicholas Brennan, he says, I didn't know anything about acting when I got my job on Buffy. Not a clue.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he said he didn't know what a mark was. He didn't know anything.
Well, I knew Sarah Michelle Gellar. She'd been acting since she was a child. I did not know that this was his first job.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was his first, but it was his definitely first major job. But he comments about how he didn't have a clue when he started on Buffy. But he plays it well, I'd say.
I agree. And then we go to the classroom where he wakes up and he is not the lead in a band. He is high school kid sitting in the classroom and waking up from a nap.
Yes. I will say, I think this is where I first have a head scratcher moment in this, because there's hardly any drool on his face. If at all. You can't really see it in the shot. I don't know if they put a little wet on the edge of his lip or not, but Buffy would have to have been fixating on Xander awfully hard to notice that drool.
It might have just been something she was saying to wake him up.
Maybe. Just be like, dude, it's class. You gotta be up.
And we hear their teacher, Dr. Gregory, talking to us about ants. And he asked Buffy a question she doesn't know the answer to, and Willow tries to give her the answer behind his back, but doesn't really fool anyone. Mm-hmm. And she touches Xander, and Buffy's like, touch, and then she sniffs Xander, and instead of smell, Buffy's like, B.O. Slightly embarrassing for Xander in a high school classroom.
Yeah.
And due to this, Dr. Gregory asked to see her after class, which I like this scene because the teacher, he starts out kind of, you had problems at your last school. The principal showed me your record. And Buffy's just like worried he's gonna, jump on her and scold her and stuff. And he says,
you have a first-rate mind and you can think on your feet. Imagine what you could accomplish if you actually did the
homework thing.
The homework thing. I understand you probably have a good excuse for not doing it. Amazingly enough, I don't care. I know you can excel in this class, and so I expect no less.
If I was still in high school, I would want this teacher.
Yeah. He is totally framed at the beginning like he's going to be the typical judgmental teacher, and flips gears in such a way that's so genuine, in a way that you really fall in love with this teacher very fast. Which makes what happens next all the more predictable in the Buffyverse, because as soon as you like a character, they're gone.
Pretty much.
Any side character that's likable, you're just like, yep, they're not sticking around.
Yep, this is their episode. They'll be gone by the next one. Mm-hmm. He wasn't trying to be her friend. He wasn't trying to be like creepy, gross teacher trying to be friends with the students. He was being firm and encouraging.
Yes. It was very genuine because he recognized her potential and told her that she has that potential, but it placed it firmly on her. It's her responsibility to actually do anything about that. So I think that translates very well into a very, very likable teacher, and you can see how much Buffy needs that. She doesn't have a lot of that.
Yeah, and you can tell she appreciates it.
Mm-hmm. So Buffy gets her pep talk, and then she leaves class, and then while Dr. Gregory is sorting through his slides, something approaches from behind, and we get this weird, claw thing, reach into the frame and pull him out, and then we go to credits.
Yep, and the show has begun with the first murder. After credits, we come back, and we're at the Bronze again. This time it's not a dream, it's real.
And we have a song playing here. It is Already Met You by Superfine. And this is a song that I remember listening to in full. It's one of the songs that I don't know if I had it on a soundtrack or what it was, but this is a song that I remember listening to pretty regularly during the height of my Buffy fandom days in my young teens.
Xander is walking around the Bronze. He's looking for friends or someone to talk to, and he goes up to the stage. I thought really interesting thing when I was reading through some of my books after rewatching this episode, the band playing is actually the band that was backing him up in his dream.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I may have known that at one time, but I did not clue into that for this viewing. But yeah.
Well, I didn't either until I read it, and then I actually rewound back to see. But Xander looks up at the lead singer, who kind of makes a face at him, kind of like, who are you?
Yeah.
Just kind of like, what? Yeah, go away.
It kind of reminds me of a more aggressive version of Buffy's awkward Bronze moment from Welcome to the Hellmouth. when she waves down that one guy or sees that one guy waving down somebody and thinks that she's being waved down. This is kind of Xander's version of that moment where he tries to acknowledge somebody outside of his friend group and is just looked at like he's the worst scum.
Yeah, although he gets a really dirty look from the band player, and the guy that was waving didn't really even realize Buffy was there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is kind of a similar moment. Then Xander actually does find some friends, kind of like football jocks sitting at a table.
In air quotes.
Yeah, friends in air quotes, acquaintances from school. And they're talking about their conquests and how many times they've scored.
Xander, how many times you scored?
Well,
It's just a question.
are we talking today or the whole week?
And they kind of look at him like he's full of it. At which point, Willow and Buffy come walking down the stairs, and Xander, he just immediately clues into this and is like, "Oh, excuse me, duty calls," and walks up to him going, "Babes," and puts his arm around each one. And the jocks kind of look at each other like, "Did that really happen?" Which, pretty smooth. And he explains what he's doing to them, and Willow is all into it. She's like, "Oh, yeah, let's show them." And Buffy kind of just stands there. But neither one walk away. Neither one walk away.
No.
So, at first, so they're there for him.
They're there to support him. But I wrote those exact same words on my notes. As Willow is into this.
Well, she's very obviously into it. She's like, "Yeah, we'll show them," and kind of just grabs him.
So this sequence here really starts the main issue that I have with this episode, which is just the weird toxic masculinity storylines that tend to be given to Xander again and again and again, and we'll see this throughout the series. But this is really, I mean, he's had some moments, but this is a really heavily focused Xander and his relationship with toxic masculinity. And at a certain point, I just don't find that particularly interesting. I think it's worth exploring to some degree, but they do it with Xander again and again and again, and it's real rough.
But for a really long time, Xander's, well, actually, I think forever, he's the only regular guy in the group. And I guess it's the only one they can give those storylines to. And one thing about that is that we watch him as the years go by kind of grow out of it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Not completely.
Not
There's always some moments way up through the 6th season, but he does grow as a person, which, you know, everyone does from the time they're 16 until adults.
Well, and one thing
but
I'll say...
Yeah, I see your point. They do that a lot.
It is rough. One thing I'll say, I had this epiphany about Xander, and I think we'll get into this with some specific episodes. But I think my biggest issue with Xander is, in a show that's really about choices and consequences, Xander kind of has a get-out-of-jail-free card a lot of times and doesn't suffer consequences the same way that the other characters do. For me, that's just a big misstep on Xander's character, because he does learn, you're right, he does eventually starts to become less and less of this really toxic version of himself, but it's very slow, and he never really comes out of that completely. But you do see, you know, a vastly different version of him in the later seasons than in the earlier seasons. But I'm wondering how much of that would have been different had they really had him suffer more from some of the poor decisions that he makes. Because I think a lot of the Scooby Gang, they make comments about how it's, you know, oh, it's just Xander. Like, they expect him to kind of mess up and don't even really think about maybe we should lay more pressure on him to not continue to do stuff like that. And I think that there's just a lot of mishandling overall of that character.
Yeah, I mean, he's not one of the best characters, the way they write him. And they do that a lot. Just expect Xander to mess up throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, you look at examples in Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, and even Once More Feeling, like the stuff that Xander does, that's really bad stuff, that leads to a lot of heartache and doesn't really have any consequences at all from those actions. And it's really frustrating as a viewer who knows what this show really focuses on is this idea of consequences. It gets really old really fast for me on some of those specific Xander storylines.
Yeah, I can see that. And I'm thinking of one episode in the third season where it really shows how they do that to him. I can't remember the episode. The Zeppo?
Yeah.
Maybe? Is that it?
Yeah.
I think that one's it.
Which is a really good episode and one of my favorite Xander episodes because it's from Xander's POV, so you get a little bit more insight on why Xander's the way he is, which I think is good. But you're right that it does point out a lot of these things. Like, the writers at least are self-aware and they'll point out the fact that they're doing this, but just being aware and pointing it out isn't necessarily the same as adjusting it to make it a more in line with the rest of the characters.
Now, Xander has a lot of obnoxious moments. In fact, I think in my notes for this episode, there's more than one place where I just write obnoxious beside it. Because that's what his character is doing.
Yeah. One thing I do like, though, is Xander's reaction to Angel, because I think it's hilarious.
That must be Angel, I think.
That weird guy that wondered about all the vampires?
That's him, I'll bet you.
Well, he's buff. She never said anything about him being buff.
You think he's buff?
He's a very attractive man. How come that never came up?
Buffy and Angel have a little conversation, and Buffy says, I'd say it's nice to see you, but we both know that's a big fib.
Mm-hmm.
And says, you're going to give me a cryptic warning, and Angel says, you're cold. And Buffy's like, you can take it. But Angel meant she looked cold, and that's when Angel gives her his leather jacket.
More gifts for Buffy.
More gifts for Buffy. And she wears this for a while.
Yep.
And then it switches back to Xander and Willow, where he says, oh, right, give her your jacket. It's a balmy night. Nobody needs to be trading clothing out there. Which that part always makes me laugh.
So when his jacket is removed, it's revealed the cuts that he has. First clue to what we think is going to be the monster of the week, which is Fort Guy. And Angel gives her the warning that he will rip her throat out if she is not ready. So that is what Angel does best, is give ominous warnings. Cryptic Guy, he is aptly titled.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Because he
gives warnings and then disappears, because after he gives her that warning, he says, I have to go.
Yep. And then in the next scene, we see Buffy talking to Giles about Cryptic Guy telling her about Fort Guy. And Giles has the best dad joke here, where he's just like, you have too many guys in your life, and literally laughs at his own joke. And I just think it's the cutest thing ever.
Yeah, it's funny. That look she gives him.
But we see immediately Buffy is wearing Angel's jacket. And this jacket is... I know that the cross is important and significant. We see the cross a lot. But this episode is the beginning of Buffy and Angel's, like, real romantic entanglement, I think. Because this is the episode where Buffy's just like, oh, yeah, this is leading somewhere that I'm not fully prepared for. She tries to fake it. Like you said at the beginning, she's like, oh, I'd say it's nice to meet you, but that'd be a big fib. But you know at this point that she's just fighting her attraction for this man, and by the end of the episode, she's lost it completely. But she wears that jacket this entire episode.
Oh, yeah, you jumped way ahead of me, because there's a scene later in the episode, I think it's one of the ending scenes, and I've got where this is the point that Buffy starts to realize she's interested.
Yeah. She's into this dude.
It's definitely this episode.
So Giles makes a comment about how every day's the same here and it's just awful.
Bright, sunny, beautiful. However, can we escape this torment?
Really?
Xander comes up, and this is probably one of my biggest Xander moments in this episode. But Xander comes up to inform Willow and Buffy that Dr. Gregory's missing, so they didn't actually have to do the reading at all. And when Buffy and Willow show genuine concern that their teacher is missing, he's just like, oh, well, let's see, the cheerleaders were modeling their short skirts, so, yeah, missing, they said missing. And I'm just like, I
think maybe I'm going to be put into the position of defending Xander a lot in this when we talk about
Very
it.
possibly.
But to be fair, he didn't know that Dr. Gregory was murdered. He just knew he wasn't there today.
Yeah, but he does know that they live on a hellmouth.
True.
It may just show that he's not the smartest tool in the shed.
Yeah, and, Willow points out that they're worried because he's one of the only teachers who doesn't think Buffy is a felon.
Which is just a revelation that I think we're always kind of aware of for Buffy, but to understand that that's just her reality at high school is just like every teacher hates her.
There's a scene later in a later episode, which I know we've mentioned later episodes a lot, so I'm sorry about that. But when she is trying to get a teacher to write a recommendation for her for something, and she finds her favorite teacher and asks, and the teacher is like, "Who are you?
Oof.
Were you absent a lot? Like, I don't know who you are, you know?" And it's just like, ouch. The majority of the teachers at the school aren't that great.
Well, to be fair, I can't imagine that it's a school that a lot of teachers really want to work at, given its history.
Very good point. Very, very valid. Very valid. They probably have lots of trouble getting teachers. They probably have Defense Against the Dark Arts curse on all of their subjects in Sunnydale.
That's a Harry Potter reference, isn't it?
Yes.
All right. Be careful with those, because you'll lose a lot of nerd cred, because I know very little about Harry Potter.
Well, I won't, because I can make the references.
You'll gain all the nerd cred, and I'll just be like, huh, that's the guy with the scar on his head, right?
Well, I'm sure that you will make references to nerd things that I'm not aware of, so it'll even out.
We get the approach of Miss French, and Xander loses all ability to people.
Yeah, he can't really talk.
Can't talk.
Forgets where the classroom is, everything.
It's rough. Blaine, however, seems relatively unaffected because he just, like, swabs his way into that situation. So I can't even really say that it's some kind of weird effect, like area effect that she has on all boys. It's just Xander. Yeah,
it's definitely because Blaine comes in and just, talks to her and takes her and brags about being a football star and everything. But I just want to say, at this point, this teacher walks up and says she's a substitute science teacher and stuff. And the way she is talking to the male students is already creepy.
Oh, yeah. She's super creepy. It's
already inappropriate. And we don't even know that anything's, it's Sunnydale and a new person just walked up. So we kind of suspect something's wrong with her. But we don't know that for sure yet.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of weird.
Yeah, there's definitely, that's our first big clue, right? Is that we went from Gregory is missing to immediately, here's a creepy substitute teacher to replace Dr. Gregory. So it's not even trying, it gives you the curveball of the vampire with the clawed hand. It gives you that, like, misdirect of Fort Guy. But it really isn't trying to be a twisty-turvy episode. It's pretty straightforward, I would say, that you see this girl and you're just like, yep, she's not good. She's a villain.
And then Xander has this line that he says to Buffy and Willow after Blaine and Miss French are gone, and he says,
"It's funny how the earth never opens up and swallows you when you want it to."
And when I was rewatching this and I heard that line, my first thought was like, just wait. Just wait. Because the earth does that a lot to you later.
So we find ourselves in the classroom again, and Buffy finds Dr. Gregory's glasses and does her first little bit of detective work to try to figure out what's going on. But I will say Buffy's detective skills are really uneven in this episode, and we're going to get into a lot of that when she just kind of makes the giant leap to the fact that obviously it's a big bug that they're up against. But here she at least has at least a more subtle approach of being like, yeah, he would have had his glasses with him, and they're got a little break on them. Like, there's something weird about it. But we start our lesson on the praying mantis. She has a lovely little reaction to when Buffy comments that they're bug ugly, and is just like so offended. So again,
yeah, that's our first sign.
Yeah, again, not a super subtle episode. But Blaine has his lovely toxic masculinity line of nothing wrong with an aggressive female. And oh my gosh.
Oh, he has like 3 or 4 lines during this scene that are just very ew.
Yeah, that's the one that always gets me. I don't know why. I think it's because Sarah Michelle Gellar's reaction to it is just like, really? That's what you're doing?
Yeah.
I gotta be honest. Miss French is not interesting to me at all. Like, she's so overtly over the top, like, just really the whole, oh, well, it would be so much fun to make model egg sacs, and then all of the men raise their hands to help her, and she's just like, we'll do it after class, and it's just so much so fast, and I just can't get behind it.
It gives us a hint to that. It is over the top, but it gives us a hint to that later.
Mm-hmm.
When Xander talks about how much Miss French is into him, and Buffy says, I know, it's called pheromones.
Yes.
So she's probably most likely secreting pheromones to make these boys like, oh yeah, I'll do anything you want.
Yeah.
You know?
But then again, it's also inconsistent because, like we said, Blaine earlier kind of had a very different reaction. And I don't know if it's just different boys react differently to it. And so Blaine's more aggressive and Xander's more like reserved and awkward. But
see, I think that their reactions show more about their personalities.
Yeah.
Like Blaine is more smooth and Xander's more awkward.
Yeah.
But they both had the same reaction to wanting to be with her.
Yes.
Like be around her and help her make, do this extra work that most kids would never want to do.
Absolutely.
It's just the way they pull it off. It's different.
I've done enough paper mache in my life to know no high school student ever really wants to do that.
To volunteer for that.
Yeah. Ugh. Oh man. But yeah, I think my issue is there's just no subtlety to it. It doesn't it works, but you're never really questioning anything other than the fact that she is some
Weird.
kind of and it's just the fact that it takes this long for the rest of the people to figure out, for Willow and Buffy to put together is oh, she's the bad guy, is where it gets really uneven on the whole detective side of this episode, because it's really, really overtly predatorial what she's doing, and it should be so clear. Us as viewers see it so fast. So Buffy, who lives on the Hellmouth, who's her job to detect things that are out of the ordinary, just kind of going along with it as long as she does, I think makes the episode read kind of funny.
Yeah, well, there is nothing subtle about anything in this episode. Like, anything at all. The next scene, they're in the school cafeteria, and they're all in line to get their lunches. And Xander's talking about how Miss French likes him, and I wonder what she sees in him. And even this early on, when he says that, he looks to Buffy to see if she's listening, if she's jealous.
Yeah.
Blaine comes through, and he is getting his food and kind of pushes past them and says that he's helping one-on-one with Miss French today, and tells Xander, when's yours? Oh, right, tomorrow. You came in second, and I came in first.
Guess that's what they call natural selection.
Guess that's what they call a rehearsal.
I love his line, his reply to this, because it's really cool, and he does it very fast.
Yeah.
It's a really quick, clever comeback. It's pretty good for Xander.
Yeah. It's actually a really clever, comeback for Blaine. Unfortunately, Blaine doesn't really hear it at all, and Buffy and Willow are not impressed. So it's more just, even when he has a good comeback, he kind of falls flat, which is unfortunate. But I want to talk a little bit about the weirdness of, and this is so because Buffy came out the time it did. If Buffy came out today and had this kind of storyline, I think it would be handled very differently. But just how casual Buffy is about this idea of a teacher romanticizing her students. And Xander frames it that way, and Buffy doesn't reject that idea or call it weird. She just says, oh, it's because
A younger man is too dumb to wonder why an older woman can't find someone her own age and too desperate to care about the surgical improvements.
And it's just really a part of this episode that stands out as a part that did not age right, because Buffy should definitely be more like,
not okay.
This is not okay. You shouldn't be infatuated with your teacher, and if you think that she's wanting more out of this than just to make a egg sack for the science fair, then something seriously needs to be dealt with here, because this is wrong.
I agree completely, but I also think that this is around the time period the show was aired, because in the late 90s, there were a lot of shows geared toward teenagers that had that storyline.
Oh, yeah.
I can think of two right off the bat other than this one. It was just kind of a thing, and it wasn't girls. It was always boys having an affair with a female teacher.
Mm-hmm. There's a very common plot line. I know, like, Dawson's Creek did it. I know, like, several kind of around this timeline did it. And it's, like I said, it is because it is very much a product of its time, and there are parts of Buffy
Yeah, it would never work today.
Yeah, there's parts of Buffy that did not age as well as other parts, and this episode is full of those parts. But Cordy barges in to get her special doctor-prescribed lunch, and finds...
That is shipped daily.
Yeah, like...
Not that she brings it daily, that it's shipped daily.
Just in case you weren't aware that Cordy's family had all of the money, she opens up the fridge that apparently nobody else opened up at all.
And was completely empty, like no shelves or anything.
No shelves or anything, and finds...
And can fit a body.
Oh, yeah. Finds the headless Dr. Gregory.
And I'm curious what they're keeping in this fridge with no shelves and just like a giant locker.
I honestly wonder, since it is Sunnydale, if they just legitimately have a fridge set aside to store bodies in, because they constantly find dead bodies and have to figure out a way to not reek up the place.
Maybe.
Like, that's part of the sanitation, the overnight sanitation, the janitorial staff. Like, that body was just left in the classroom, and the janitor was just like, well, gotta stick this in the body freezer in the kitchen so we don't have to worry about it till tomorrow.
Well, that's the second body we found behind a door so far in Sunnydale.
Yeah.
I think I might keep a tally.
Some people do Giles knocked out tallies. We're doing the opening a door to discover a body tally.
Works for me. Cordelia screams, and Xander, Willow, and Buffy react, and all three run over to look at this body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know, like, my high school, you weren't allowed in the kitchen. Like, students weren't allowed in the kitchen. And something like this, there would be, like, cafeteria workers, like, trying to move the kids away to see what they're all screaming at. And, like, it's like nobody else is there.
No.
Like, just students looking at a body. And it's like, where are all the adults?
We've established so far that Sunnydale High has terrible teachers, it has terrible staff, it has a designated body freezer. I think all of this is canon.
Quite possibly. I like the designated body freezer being canon.
We'll, I'm sure, notice many other times where there should be more adults present, and there just isn't. And it is one of those, you gotta accept that Buffy lives in a weird reality where no adults have any clue on how to handle what's happening, so they just ignore it constantly and hope it goes away. So in the next scene, we're at the library, and we have this scene between Buffy, Willow, Xander, and Giles that I think, again, shows me the unevenness of the first season. Because this scene, like, they're really affected by Dr. Gregory's passing. Like, it doesn't take them a long time to get through, but Buffy's crying, Xander's kind of freaking out, Willow's distraught, and everybody's kind of, in a mourning stage. And when you look at this compared to what happened with Jesse,
I was just thinking that. Why weren't y'all this upset about your friend?
It's just,
I mean, maybe not Buffy, because she barely knew him, but Xander and Willow.
Yeah, it's just weird.
That's kind of another example of how season 1 is very much every episode stands alone.
Yeah, you get a lot of that reset. And you get an example of this because Giles, in talking about his research, feels the need that he needs to clarify who the Master is, which I don't think ever happens again in the traditional, like, serialized Buffy that you see later on, where it's kind of expected. Mm-hmm. You know who the main players are. But here he says that he's researching the Master, and then says that he's the resident vampire king, which is a really awkward thing to say, because clearly everybody in that room knows that. But it's clearly like they are still trying to figure out, is this a show where people are going to watch it week to week, or is this a show where we constantly have to remind people what's going on? And you get into this rough place in the beginning of a lot of shows where they're constantly having to figure out how to explain things quickly to new viewers. But this line just feels really unnatural. Yeah.
I've been trying to gather more information about the Master, our local vampire king.
it's something about the delivery, something about like the beat that comes after. I don't know. There's just something weird about it. And also, like, Vampire King, have we ever known the Master to be a Vampire King? Is that what we call him? Because I haven't ever really thought of him as a king.
I don't think he's a vampire king. Just kind of in charge, maybe. But almost all the groups of vampires that we see throughout this have a leader.
Yes.
It's usually the vampire that made most of them. Mm-hmm. Now, there is a line before we get to that part when Giles says that I really like, where they're discussing what happened to Dr. Gregory. Mm-hmm. And Giles says, "What do we know?" And Buffy says, "Not a lot. He was killed on campus, probably the same day we last saw him." And Giles says, "How do you know?" And Buffy says, "He didn't change his clothing," which she noticed the clothes on the body and that they were the same clothes that the teacher was wearing the day before, which was actually pretty observant of her. I don't know that if I found a dead body in a refrigerator, I would look at the clothes.
Yeah, and she also investigates the bite marks because she brings that up earlier. So she has enough time to look at that body to kind of get all of this information to help with the investigation. Detective Buffy, as I like to call her.
And this doesn't have much to do with the show, but I don't understand why these teenagers keep saying clothing.
Okay.
Instead of clothes. It feels awkward to me. Like Xander says, it's cold. Nobody needs to be exchanging clothing out there.
Yeah.
And it just feels weird. Like, most people would just say clothes.
It is.
You think?
It is a very well. It's a very specific. I haven't noticed it, but now that you point it out, it is a very specific decision, and I think it's probably more. Sometimes I've written enough to know that you kind of get a word stuck in your head, and you just keep repeating that word whenever you're trying to label something. And so, like, at one point, David Greenwald decided he wanted to use clothing instead of clothes, and then he got stuck on clothing and couldn't ever return to clothes.
Maybe.
But it
just feels weird every time they say that. I'm like, you're a teenager. Why are you saying clothing?
I don't think I've ever really picked up on that. But you're right, like, thinking about those lines, they do specifically say clothing. It's one of those things where Buffy has such emphasis on the language and Buffy speak as it's known that you pick up on some really odd choices from time to time because, man, the dialogue in this show really does what it wants to.
So then they kind of decide that it wasn't a vampire because his blood wasn't drained, that there's something else out there besides Fort Guy. Mm-hmm. Giles says that there was an incident a couple of nights before where a homeless man was practically shredded in Weatherly Park, and Buffy picks up on that and says, "Where was that guy killed? Weatherly Park?" And Giles tells her not to go investigate there alone, and she says, "Cross my heart, I won't." And then the very next scene is she is jumping into the fence to go into Weatherly Park because Buffy's going to do what she wants, no matter what.
I was about to say, that's it. That's their relationship in a nutshell. Buffy, don't do the thing, and then Buffy does the thing.
Exactly. Buffy always does the thing.
So this is an interesting section because it's a rather elongated session of Buffy patrolling Weatherly Park here and interacting with the homeless population, enough so that she finds a couple of different homeless people pretty close together. And I don't really think, other than maybe a couple of examples I can think of from season 5, we really think about the homeless population in Sunnydale after this. But I think that part of it is, like, homeless people in Sunnydale don't really make sense. Because where the heck are they hiding out from vampires?
Very good point. Like, how are they staying safe at night? Which it's really interesting, and I did not know this until I was doing my, I guess I would call it homework for this podcast. You know, I rewatched the episodes so it would be fresh in my mind, and I read through the script book so it would be fresh in my mind. And I never realized this before, but the first homeless guy that Buffy sees in the scene that's like all drunk and says, "Shouldn't be here out at night, little lady, it's dangerous," is actually an undercover cop.
Is he?
Yes, and I only know that because it says so in the script book. I never knew it before. And if you're just watching the episode, I don't think people pick up on it. But later, when Buffy is fighting the Fort guy, and you hear the voices saying, "Over here, I heard something. Hold it, police."
Mm-hmm.
And you see the cops. That same homeless guy says, "I heard him spread out." And that was a undercover cop.
So here's the thing that
But
makes...
it's not obvious.
Yeah, here's the thing that makes that connect in my brain. Because when the police show up, I wrote the comment that it's like police from the 1950s, just because their dialect and the way that they say things is so like kind of weird and out of time. But when you said the line from the homeless man, and he's just like, "Shouldn't be out here alone, little lady," I was just like, oh, that's kind of the same way that the police talked. So I wonder if that was a conscious decision to make that kind of out of time a little bit, to link that. But I never picked up on that. I just noticed this time.
Oh, I didn't either.
I just noticed this time I was just like, huh, those police are from like the 1950s.
I never picked up on it either until I read it. When I watched the episode and then read the script book, and I saw that, and I was like, yeah, I did not catch that.
Yeah. It's the first attempt to try to make the police in Sunnydale at least try to be active as far as patrolling the more dangerous areas at night. I don't know.
There's not many more attempts.
No, there's not many more attempts.
That might be the first one, but there's not many more.
So Fort Guy makes a getaway and finds Miss French on the way and is absolutely terrified. And Buffy witnesses all of this from what appears, based on how they shot it, to be just a few feet away, but somehow Miss French doesn't notice Buffy at all.
I thought that, I had that thought too, like, how does Miss French not know she's there? Because she's not hiding or anything. She's just standing there behind a chain link fence. You can see her.
Yeah, she's right there. And then we get this lovely scene. I really like this next scene at the library between Buffy and Giles, where Giles is just scolding her.
You went hunting last night?
Yes.
When you assured me you wouldn't.
Yes, I lied. I'm a bad person. Let's move on.
But, Buffy's always going to do that. Just something for Giles to accept.
Mm-hmm.
And Giles' next question, did you see someone with a fork? It's they're looking for Fort Guy. Buffy tells him, go ahead.
I just imagine up until this point, Giles just had a mental image of just a regular vampire holding a piece of cutlery.
Buffy tells him about Mitch French and what happened. Giles is like, yeah, that's not really normal. Maybe we should keep an eye on her.
I do like the line, though, before we get to that point where Giles is acknowledging that Miss French is lovely, and he says, in a common, extremely well-proportioned way.
There's something that makes all the men like her, and it's got to be pheromones.
Yeah.
Pheromones.
Yeah.
Pheromones.
Pheromones?
I can't pronounce. I pronounced it right earlier. I can't do it now, though. Yeah, so they decide they're going to watch her, and Buffy says, well, I need to go to class then, and then we get our second scene ever with Principal Flutie. No, our third.
Third. It's the best, though. It's so good.
It is. It's awesome. He's very much about seeing a counselor.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who saw the body has to see a crisis counselor, which is kind of weird considering in all the stuff that has happened before, they weren't seeing crisis counselors.
And all the stuff that happens after.
Yeah, and Welcome to the Hellmouth, the dead guy was found in the locker and all they did was cancel Jim.
Yeah. It could be that the girls in the locker room had to see a crisis counselor. It's just only if you see the body. Only if you see the body is that something that should be offered.
Okay, that's the rule then.
Not the fact that, there are dead people on campus. And this time specifically
Pretty
a
much
teacher.
Always.
Like a lot of students know this teacher.
And I love the line that Flutie says.
I really believe if we all reach out to one another, we can beat this thing. I'm always here if you need a hug, but not a real hug, because there's no touching in this school. We're sensitive to wrong touching.
Which is obviously not Miss French's
No.
school of thought, but very, very funny.
Yes.
And Buffy keeps trying to say, I gotta go to class. I'm fine. Flutie, you have to heal. She says, no, I really have to go. And he says, heal. And she sits, which I think is really funny.
Yes.
Like, when he says that, she just, sits down when he gives that command.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just find that scene amusing.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot in this scene. There's even a couple of things that you didn't touch on, because there's just so much. He talks so fast in this scene.
Yes.
It's just great.
It's funny.
But one thing that I think is worth pointing out in our deeper discussion of the weird teacher-student relationship thing is you have this line about that the school is sensitive to wrong touching coming from a male authority figure to a female student. And it again kind of shows this idea, like, of this time, it was kind of a popular thing to do the student-teacher relationship, but it was almost always a male student and a female teacher. And it shows that weird double standard of having to purposefully point out that this principal is so hyper-aware that even, like, suggesting that a hug is something that could be exchanged is something that he feels like he has to, like, red flag immediately. He's like, no, that's not what I meant. I don't mean actually, like, hugging or anything like that. But then you have this teacher who's so obviously, like, aggressive towards all of the male students. This female teacher that's so aggressive, like, everybody, like, she's not hiding it at all, and nobody bats an eyelash at it. Like, it's just a really weird double standard that I'm not sure... Like, I'm not sure how intentional this line was to try to point out that double standard. It doesn't always work. Like, I don't think it's so clear that people watching would just understand that that's a message that they're trying to get across, or even if that is a message that they're trying to get across. But I think that line is purposeful to a degree to be in this episode of the idea of sensitive to wrong touching coming from the principal.
I agree. Then we see Buffy outside the counselor's office, and Cordelia's in there talking, and then it just everything Cordelia says is hilarious. But my question is, why aren't Xander and Willow in line to see the counselor? They saw the body too, and it never really addresses them seeing the counselor. It's just Buffy and Cordelia.
Maybe they already saw earlier. I don't know.
Possibly.
I really like Cordelia's barely in this episode, but I really like that she has this line of, after expressing the fact that she's been able to lose some weight after seeing the body, that when tragedy strikes, you have to look on the bright side. Because I think, in a weird way, that summarizes Cordelia so well. She just, as much as you associate Cordelia with negativity, she's also kind of an optimist in a lot of events in her life, especially over in Angel. I would count her more as an optimist. As the series progresses, she kind of has a way of just brightening up the room with her presence because of that. And it's just a weird, like, really, like, joke line that I think actually it does a good job of expressing how Cordelia's minds work.
Well, she always finds the positive thing for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't happen, like, if it's world peace or something, that's not the bright
it needs
side
to be
that
positive
she's
for her.
Yeah. But it is very, very funny. And, of course, Sarah Michelle Gellar's reaction of just like, oh.
Oh, that look. That look Buffy gives. It's like disgusted and disbelieving at the same time.
So we cut to the classroom, and Miss French is giving instructions, and then very obviously, again, with the wrong touching, approaches Xander and flat out gives him an answer to the quiz. But then my favorite part is when Buffy approaches to look through the window and realizes that they're having a pop quiz. Miss French is fairly centralized in the classroom. She's a little further to the back, but there's definitely at least a couple of students behind her when she just decides to stand up straight and spin her head completely around to eye Buffy. And again, just the overt lack of subtlety.
Yes, and that's a weird part that she knows Buffy is there.
Yeah.
And the night before, she didn't know Buffy was there.
Yeah. It's constantly contradicting itself within, like, minutes of
Buffy's
each other.
more hidden behind the door with that little tiny bit of window than she is way out in the open just behind a chain link fence.
Mm-hmm.
If Miss French can sense her behind that door looking at her, then why wouldn't she sense her the night before?
Yeah. And if she can sense her, why is she revealing herself? Like, you
by
would
turning her head like that.
Her
yeah,
objective
exactly.
would be to not get caught on what she's doing.
Right.
This episode's rough, guys.
Yeah, it is. They go back to the library, and Buffy's telling Willow what happened, and Giles is there. He says he hasn't found a creature that a vampire would be scared of, and she tells him about the head, Miss French turning the head, and Giles says, nothing human can do that.
Yeah, which is a really weird line. Because he's obviously not looking up and researching humans. Like, I even use the word creature. Like, why would he be like, oh, well, we've ruled out humans, I guess, is the takeaway from that. I don't know, like, why.
Well, they hadn't decided at this point that Miss French was something evil.
Uh-huh.
You know.
She did.
Now they have. But
No, they discussed her at the very beginning because the vamp was scared of her, and
True.
so
But
when they
just
get back
said
to
they
this,
keep an eye on her.
yeah. But when they get back to this, he's trying to figure out what creature could scare a vampire, and he can't find one. And Buffy's like, look up things that can turn their heads all the way around. And Giles is like, well, nothing human can do that. I'm just like, are you investigating humans for things that scare vampires? Because I'm pretty sure humans aren't in that category. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's really weird.
I see what you're saying with that point, but when I heard him say it, he's making the comment that, like, she's not human.
Yeah. It could be that's what they were going for, but it's jagged at best.
And then, you mentioned earlier this next line. Buffy says, no, nothing human, but there's some insects that can. And you had mentioned earlier that Buffy just kind of jumps to the conclusion that it's a bug really quick.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's probably because she did her homework.
Okay.
Like, she had just read those chapters for Dr. Gregory because he had encouraged her so much. And she learned that, so it was fresh in her mind.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I like that reading, and it's referenced again at the end where she's like, when you do your homework, you learn stuff. I think for me, the issue is, why would a bug be the first jump that you make when you live on the Hellmouth, and you would think that they would be investigating demons and supernatural beings, and she jumps straight to bugs. And it's just, like it's pointed out in the next bit where she comes back and she's like,
dig this. The praying mantis can rotate its head 180 degrees while waiting for its next meal to walk by. Ha! Well, come on, guys. Ha!
And everybody else is just like, really? This doesn't seem like it's the right answer. But Buffy is just so sure, and she turns out to be right, which is fine and all.
She's not wrong a lot.
Yeah, but it seems like there should have been a more clear jump to that point for the viewers.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
Made more of a connection.
Yeah.
But I just kind of always thought it's because she did her homework.
Yeah.
So that's why she...
Yeah. Fits with the story with Dr. Gregory really well. Mm-hmm. But again, it seems like kind of a leap when you're just watching it.
And when she leaves during this scene to go look for books on bugs, like, she turns around and her hair is like the bounciest hair I have ever seen. Like, it bounces half a foot off her shoulders when she's just walking. I don't know why I really noticed that, but like it was just like,
there's just so many quotes,
like springs in it. I don't know.
There's so many quotes from the entire series that are referencing the bounciness of Buffy's hair that just are flowing through my brain right now. But it's true. She has bouncy hair.
It is really, really bouncy in this scene. Like, I want to know what conditioner Sarah Michelle Gellar was using. Xander goes to meet Miss French for their project. And she's making her lunch from a small Tupperware that is labeled food. Mm-hmm. Which I find hilarious because it just says food. So Xander comes in and tells her he's ready to make the egg sacks, and she kind of arranges it where he has to come to her house that night to work on it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, teachers don't really do that.
Yeah.
Like, why would you invite a single student to your... I mean, as a teacher, I don't even think you should invite multiple students to your house, but she's like inviting one single student to her house, which, considering the other things that she's done in this episode, kind of par for the course, but still weird.
The choice to make her so over the top on the seductress scale, and you have this framing as well. The scene even cuts back to the dream with Xander's guitar riff when he realizes that she wants to meet him at her place. But framing it with Buffy's very seductress nature in Xander's dream, and you kind of realize that this is what Xander wants when a woman looks at him. He wants her to have this so over the top that it's like really creepy and gross and should put you off. But he kind of wants that as far as his fantasy self. He wants that. And so you have this really creepy, uncomfortable where she's just like,
"Oh, Xander, I've done something really stupid. I hope you can forgive me."
Like,
yeah, it's cringy.
Oh,
it's cringy.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. They make a date to meet at her house. Very inappropriate. We do learn during this scene that Xander's middle name is Lavelle.
Yes. And I'm pretty sure, other than Buffy, Xander is the only character that has a middle name. Is there any other character that's given a middle name?
I can't think of any.
But yeah, it is a
Lavelle.
Lavelle is a interesting, but I mean, he has you can tell that is something that he doesn't reveal to people, and he has no filter at all in front of this. The pheromones are working overtime because he just can't control his mouth. So I think my favorite thing about her container labeled food, which is in fact live crickets, is the fact that she's a giant bug, but she's at least dignified enough to eat her crickets in a sandwich with mayo.
Yeah, and I was wondering, she has like 10 crickets. She's a giant bug. I would think she would need like a massive amount of crickets, not 10.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't seem like it was enough food in her container labeled food.
It's just a light afternoon snack. It's just a light afternoon
just
snack.
A snack. Yeah.
Just to tide her over till she bites someone's head off later on.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. Okay, then we're back at the library, and Willow and Giles and Buffy are discussing what it could be, and she decides it's a praying mantis, and they decide that would probably work.
Could in fact be a thing. And then Giles just happens to know a guy who's an expert on bugs and fairy tales.
Giles always knows a guy.
There's always a guy a phone call away.
In England. There's always a guy in England he has to call. Oh, I like this part when he says that...
I had a chum at Oxford, Carlisle, advanced degrees in entomology and mythology.
Entoma who?
Bugs and fairy tales.
I knew that.
And I was like, why would anyone get degrees in bugs and fairy tales? It seems like there's such different...
Yeah, you say that.
Different courses of study.
You say that. But I have a nephew who I could see wanting to do that as a double major.
Yeah, I could see that too. I know your nephew. But they do seem like such very different studies of interest. But
Not
I guess
Carlisle.
they worked for this guy.
No, Carlisle knew what he was getting into. He understood. So a couple of things that are revealed. They find out for sure that Blaine is missing, and they realize that he, of course, was the boy to see Miss French previously, so that's a huge red flag. But also, Willow begins her hacking of the coroner's office, and then there's like a weird line that again feels kind of contradictory to what I observed in, I believe it was in The Harvest, where she starts hacking and Giles is kind of just like okay with it.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's just like, oh, yep, I wasn't here, couldn't have stopped it. Which he's still kind of okay with it, but okay with it in a way that he bears no responsibility for it at all.
And at this point, they decide that Buffy needs to go warn Xander. Mm-hmm. Which he is so obnoxious during this entire scene.
Man.
I just want to be like, oh no, just step away from him. You know, she goes to warn him and he immediately assumes that it's because she's jealous.
This sounds really weird. I'm aware
No,
of
it
that.
doesn't sound weird at all. I completely understand. I've met someone and you're jealous.
What?
Look, there's nothing I can do about it. There's just a certain chemical thing between Miss French and me.
I know. I read all about it. It's called, a pheromone. It's a chemical attractant that insects give off.
She's not an insect. She's a woman, okay? And hard as that may be for you to conceive, an actual woman finds me attractive.
Well, and there's...
Yeah, it's just bad.
Yeah, there's another layer of this weird toxic masculinity that his only way of putting down Angel is to say that he has a girly name.
Yeah, while we're on the subject, what kind of girly name is Angel anyway?
Yeah. Like, there are so many things that I, in this situation, could point out and be like, you don't know this guy. He looks like he's older than you. He's clearly, like... Dramatic and super mysterious, and that doesn't always equal good, you know?
And you're like, how does he always know who the bad guys are? Or that the bad guys are coming?
Yeah. Like,
you know,
there's so
not
many...
worried about Angel.
There's so many red flags, and he chooses the fact that the name is girly to be the thing that he points out.
But this kind of shows that Xander is way jealous of Angel even before he knows that Angel is a vampire.
Yes.
And with Xander's hatred of vampires, it just makes it so much worse when he finds out. Because he already doesn't like him.
Oh, yeah.
And at this point, Xander hasn't even had a conversation with him yet.
Yeah, hasn't had a conversation. The only thing he really knows about Angel is that he has helped Buffy a couple of times, and Buffy has received gifts from him and at least given him attention that, again...
she didn't give Xander.
Yeah, again, in this frame, I don't really think that Buffy really has the feelings for Angel yet, other than this guy's really annoying, and she's aware that he's attractive. She's got that much figured out, but she hasn't reached that next level of just acknowledging that he's attractive in her feelings toward him. But Xander is immediately like, the fact that she's giving him any attention is on the defensive.
Yes. Then we switch to Miss French's house, and Xander's there and opens the door, and she is dressed like it is very obvious that she is trying to seduce Xander.
Mm-hmm.
And she is wearing a very low-cut dress, very short dress.
I'm trying to remember. I kind of want to go back and watch the episode, but I think the cut is kind of similar to the red dress that Buffy wears in Xander's dream.
It is.
And
the tops are different, but it's very similar.
But I think that the decision to put Buffy in a red dress, which is more associated with lust, and to put Miss French in a black dress, which is more associated with death, is a very specific one. Because
I can see that.
I don't know. She may experience arousal from all of this, but I think she's in it for the procreation and the killing of these boys more than anything. She just wants to further her species and kill some boys and have a nice snack in the process.
And then there's one line here from Xander that makes me not like Xander a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're discussing Greek food for some reason. I think because Xander's rambling on and on.
I like cucumbers, like in that Greek salad thing with the yogurt. You like Greek food? I'm exempting shawarma, of course. I mean, what's that all about? It's a big meat hive.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to diss shawarma like that? Shawarma is awesome. Shawarma is like one of the best things ever.
That's the thing. That's the line.
Yes.
That's the line you draw. Be like, I'll defend Xander on a lot of things, but when he insults shawarma...
Well, I mean, we should give him a chance until he just does something unforgivable.
I like the shawarma reference because it makes me think of Avengers, and even though Joss Whedon didn't write this episode, I think Joss Whedon liked the casual mention of shawarma so much that he held on to it for so many years so he could put it in Avengers.
I thought about that too. Where a lot of Joss Whedon shows just talk about shawarma randomly.
Yep.
I don't know if it's a food he just really likes or a food he really dislikes, or he just likes the way the word sounds.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something there.
There's something. So we've mentioned a couple of times of the creepiness of Miss French, but man, this scene cranks it up to 11. This is such an uncomfortable scene as a viewer, knowing what's going on, and it's just so thickly layered. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, but I think that this scene would have been so much more uncomfortable if they had been a little bit more subtle in earlier scenes. Like, I like that this scene's uncomfortable because it should be an uncomfortable scene, but
it's not as shocking.
It's not as shocking as I feel like it should be.
Because she was like this throughout the show.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, and it would have been. He drinks the martini she gives him, and it's, drugged.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're into date rape drugs.
Yeah.
Which also bad, and lots of things to discuss there, but we'll probably just...
fog over that one.
Yeah.
So a couple of things that I do want to point out. I think that the choice to have Blaine shouting in the background is really good. I kind of wish that it wasn't ever pointed out, like they just had him shouting and Xander never acknowledged that he was shouting. But I do think that again adds a layer of creepiness to this moment, that Blaine's just down there screaming, probably nonstop.
And points to Xander. He does hear this and is concerned that someone
but I think
is crying out for help.
Yeah, I think I would have not blamed Xander if he didn't hear this, because he's so drugged and loopy, and I think there might have been a thematic tension layered on had you just heard the screams and not acknowledged them at all. But what I will say is that there is a moment that really comes at this infatuation with Buffy in a whole nother light, when Xander is reminded of his dream again, where Buffy, makes the comment about his hand. And here he is, drugged out with this, incredibly well-proportioned woman. And he says, "I love Buffy."
Yeah. Buffy. I love Buffy.
Yeah. And it makes you have that little bit of, like, this is real for Xander, right? This isn't just
a crush.
This isn't just, I like Buffy because she's attractive or she's out of my league or whatever thing you might apply to that. Because here he is in the situation where he's still, he hasn't really determined anything's wrong. He's just, it's his first time to have a martini. He doesn't know how fast those things work. But he has this moment of just, like, I love Buffy. And you realize that even in this stupor, he still has such strong feelings for Buffy that he's going to bring her up in this scenario. And like you said earlier, there's been a lot of times where you see he specifically looks to see Buffy's reaction when things happen because he wants to see if there's even a glimmer of hope that she feels the same way about him.
Then we see where Natalie asks him, "Would you like to touch me with your hands?" And he looks down and her hands are on top of his. And she, for some reason, and I don't understand why, she starts to turn into a bug.
I wonder if it's a side effect of the drug that he's on. Like if it manipulates his, I don't know.
Perception?
Yeah, I just don't know. Like, it doesn't seem like it's the right time to do it. You would probably wait until he's fully passed out, but maybe she knows he's so far gone. Because I think it is a conscious decision to switch back because she remains a giant mantis for the rest of the episode.
But at this point, Xander, your hands are really serrated when he sees them. And I just think that's hilarious. Like, that's a good description. He doesn't, like, stop and start screaming or anything. He just finishes his sentence. And then he passes out, and we see the giant praying mantis dragging him away.
So I have another counter to add to your opening a door and finding a body. I also want you to count the number of times that we're somehow chained or imprisoned in a basement, because I think that's a pretty regular thing in Buffy as well.
Just anybody or one particular character?
Anybody.
Okay.
If you're in a basement, there's a good chance that you're chained or imprisoned in some way.
So this is our first chained in a basement.
As far as I know, I'm pretty sure. Like, he is locked in a cell in a basement.
Okay. And then we've got 2 bodies in lockers.
Yes.
Or bodies in cabinets. Got this? This will be an interesting counter to do.
But anyway, we're in the basement, and Xander and Blaine are in cages. And Blaine, who is just completely off of the drug effects. At a certain point, the drugs do not work, and apparently it's when she's in full-on mantis form. That just they're not strong enough to combat that. Which I would think that the pheromones would work no matter what. But he is not into it anymore, and is
which is understandable.
Yeah. At a certain point, something overrides the pheromones. Either that, or she's just really creepy and likes them to be scared. There could be that too, and so she doesn't deploy those pheromones anymore in this scenario. I don't know how that works, but Blaine is just panic mode, can't get the sentence out, and then finally gets it out that the ultimate conclusion to all of this is that she mates with you.
She gets you in. What? What does she do? Oh God. Oh no. Blaine! What does she do?
She takes you out of the cage and she ties you up and she starts moving and throbbing, and these eggs come shooting out of her, and then what? And then what? She mates with you.
The rest of this show, it switches back and forth between Buffy, Willow and Giles, and the giant praying mantis, Xander and Blaine. And it seems to me this whole time that they are not on the same time.
Oh, no.
Like, the things that Buffy, Willow, and Giles are all doing would seem like they would take so much longer than the scenes with Xander and Miss French and Blaine, but they go back and forth like they're happening at the same time. They're just so out of sequence or out of time that it's really weird.
Yeah, and there's some shows that I've noticed do that, but I think the reason that this one feels particularly weird is because it has this ticking clock feel, right? Because the one group is specifically trying to go to save the other group. So you think, oh, they're on the same timeline, and they're really not.
Yeah, it does make it seem like they are, but there's just no way, because when it shows the scenes with Xander, they're like a minute or two long.
Yeah.
It seems like, and then the other scenes seem like things are happening that would take 30 minutes to an hour. You know, it's just, it kind of gives a weird feel to the end of the show.
So one thing I will say positive about Xander is that he's pretty calm and collected in this scenario. He assures Blaine that they're gonna get out of this. At one point, he works a bar free and is just like, "Hey, it's a weapon." Which again, I've often shared how much I like characters that think ahead and think, "Oh, I need a weapon. Let me grab something that I can use as a bludgeon or anything at all." So I will give Xander huge props that he is actually pretty put together in this situation, enough so that he's thinking on his feet and trying to get out of this situation and actually save the day, which is something that we don't see Xander get the opportunity to do a whole lot, but he's definitely gets points for effort.
Yes, definitely he does. He's not like cowering or crying or anything like that. He's trying to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the gang is back in the library, and we hear Giles talking on the phone.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure when it is, but there's a time where Giles is just very, very shouty and angry, and I know he's talking to one of the staff members, I assume, at whatever institute that Carlisle is in, and I'm just like, dude, that person does not deserve that. I know that you're trying to deal with a she-mantis and all of that, but that person does not deserve your yells.
Yeah, he's like, "Young lady, I don't care what time it is, unlock his cell and strap him and bring him to the phone. This instant, lives are at stake." And obviously he's in some kind of psychiatric facility, which more than likely she would have just hung up on him.
Yeah.
You know, like, how is this guy going to save somebody's life? But he's talking to Carlisle after he gets him on the phone, and he says,
Absolutely. No, it sounds exactly like the creature you described. You were right all along about everything. Well, no, you weren't right about your mother coming back as a Pekingese, but try to rest, old man.
So he's obviously has some psychiatric issues.
Yes. I think it's more than just the effects of the she-mantis or whatever version of the succubus that he found. But here we get the explanation of why he picked his particular two paths of study, which is the fact that he's relating the she-mantis back to Greek sirens and Celtic sea maidens and all of this, very much creatures of legend, and associating it with the modern form of the she-mantis, or this particular version, which is the she-mantis. And I think that that's one of the few saving graces of this storyline, because it's really a succubus storyline. The she-mantis is such a weird choice, but it really is a very traditional story, a very traditional folk creature. I just don't really know why they had to go with giant praying mantis.
Uniqueness, maybe? Probably never been done before.
Sometimes originality isn't always a bonus.
I agree. I agree 100%. It is not the greatest of episodes. I mean, it's fun to watch, but there are much, much better ones. Then they discuss how Xander's probably fine because he's not a virgin, and the she-mantis only goes after virgins. And Willow says, yeah, he's going to die. Mm-hmm. And grabs the phone to call him, discovers that his mom said he had to go to his teacher's house to work on a science project. And now they're like, oh no, we have to save Xander. Mm-hmm. They try to find Miss French's address in the school computer. And Buffy, who she did her homework, tells Giles he has to go to record some bat sonar because it'll affect the praying mantis's nervous system. And they all run off to do their stuff. And meanwhile, we're back at Miss French's and basically just waiting for the she-mantis to pick one of them.
Yeah, I think this is when we get the Xander grabbing the weapon, and then it's hard to do this scene by scene because it cuts back and forth so fast. Because we get to the quick cut back to the library where they discover that Miss French should be 90 years old, and then we cut back to the basement, and then we have Blaine in just like the grossest of moves, just be like, He did it. Take him. He's the one that broke your thing. But then after all of that, we arrive to the real Miss French's house. And she is just the most delightful.
Oh, she's so sweet. She's so sweet.
And I love that Buffy's ready to kick this sweet old lady's door down. Like, again, Buffy's lack of hesitation could sometimes backfire, because she is primed and ready when Miss French opens the door and is just the sweetest old lady. You could tell, just thinks back of her years of teaching so fondly, and you just love her to bits.
I taught for over 30 years. I retired in 1972.
I can't believe this. She used Miss French's records to get into the school. She could be anywhere.
No, dear. I'm right here.
Then we go back to the cellar, and in the midst of all this, I love this scene because it shows this giant she-mantis monster pointing back and forth between the boys. And they're like, what's she doing? And Blaine says, I think it's eeny, meeny, miny, mo, to figure out which one of them she's going to eat first. And I just love that they had this giant predatory monster do eeny, meeny, miny, mo to pick her prey.
This is the part of the episode where I'll say they're very self-aware of what they're doing and how ridiculous and over the top it is when they have this giant menacing praying mantis use eeny, meeny, miny, mo as her form to select her next prey.
But it's funny.
It's funny, sure. What should be like this really tense, terrifying moment is just this giant puppet pointing back and forth.
We're back at Giles and Willow and Buffy, and they're trying to find the actual house where Miss French lives. And they're like, we have to do something. We don't have any time. And Buffy's like, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
And she jumps into the manhole cover.
Mm-hmm.
And when she comes back up, she has the fork guy.
Yes.
Which seems very easy.
Yeah. When you think about it, because she uses that as the faster way of doing it versus just banging on doors.
Right.
And I don't think it would necessarily be faster
than banging on doors. No. This is why I say the scenes going back and forth are so out of sequence.
Yeah.
Because all these things that they're doing would take so much time, and it's just minutes passing for Xander.
Mm-hmm.
I love how Buffy does this. She just decides what needs to be done, and she does it.
Yeah.
She's not going to stand around and discuss it and debate, and she's like this from the beginning.
Yes.
And like this through the entire series. And there are a lot of points in the series where she gets in fights or, arguments and things get tense between her and her friends and her and Giles because she does this. But I think that's just kind of part of being a Slayer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they can discuss it all they want, but she's going to make the final decision because it's her responsibility.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fighting and drama surrounding that in later episodes.
Yeah, and you see that a lot in this episode because it's the same with her patrolling earlier and just flat out ignoring what Giles tells her to do. What I like about this is that Angel at the beginning of the episode builds this guy up as being just a huge threat, right? Like, we'll rip Buffy's throat out. And then Buffy just goes and hogties him and starts using him as a LoJack.
Yeah, to find Miss French's house because he's scared of her. They find the house because he gets really scared when they get to it. And he cuts through the rope that she has around him. They have a little fight, and she grabs a slat from the picket fence and, stakes him with it, which also seems really easy. Like, she goes and kidnaps this guy, uses him to locate a different monster, and then stakes him really fast.
Which, I think, again, we have to understand that early Angel was really not meant to be a fighter, and later on we see that he is much more an equal to Buffy than these first couple of episodes imply, because he is often intimidated by stuff that Buffy takes on with very little challenge.
Mm.
But I do appreciate the fact that she stakes a vampire with a white picket fence.
Yeah, and then Buffy breaks into the cellar where Xander is being kissed by the she-mantis. Where she's just like, kiss me. And I'm like, she really thinks that, like, this is going to happen? Like, okay. She jumps in, says, let him go, and fighting with the she-mantis. Buffy pulls out insect spray and sprays her with it.
I like how, this is my favorite part about the she-mantis, is that it's not like it's a demon that shares some physical traits with the she-mantis, or with a regular mantis. She is literally just a giant praying mantis. Mm-hmm. Like, everything that would impact a praying mantis impacts her. There's no difference at all.
Insect spray.
Yeah, like the spray, the bat sonar, even though, like, bats to this thing would be nothing.
Yeah, she screams and jumps back, and meanwhile Blaine is back there just screaming, "Help me, help me." Buffy gets out the tape recorder to do the bat sonar, and she pushes play, and you hear Giles's voice recording, talking about how to file things alphabetically by author.
I love this so much.
Like what happens to your nervous system when you hear this?
Extremely important to file, not simply alphabetically.
Giles!
It's the wrong side.
I just love that Giles, at some point, like, he has, like, a podcast or something where he explains how to catalog a library, and that is a podcast I need in my life. I just need that.
I would listen to it.
I need that so much.
I would definitely listen to that. But the she-mantis knocks it out of her hand, and they continue fighting. And this is kind of a thing that happens a lot. Xander jumps in to try to help, and Buffy pushes him back. Mm-hmm. And is like, "Xander, get out." Because he does that a lot, and a lot of times he gets in the way.
Yes.
He's trying to help. Xander's
really
not
is.
a coward.
Yeah, he's not. I would never frame him as a coward. I would frame him as sometimes stupid in his courage or ill-placed in his courage. And he doesn't really think things through. But what we'll see through the run of this series, and what I think is really interesting, is that you'll notice a lot of characters have a different way that they fight with Buffy. And I don't mean like against her, but like along her side. A lot of characters, like Xander, here's a good example of him getting in her way. Whereas later on, when you see her fight side by side with Spike, you see Spike a lot of times pulls back and is more of a support figure and throws her weapons and things like that. There's a lot of like specific choices made with how these different characters fight together. And that's something that I think is interesting to unpack as we go over the series. But Xander is kind of the worst at just jumping in and getting in the way and causing Buffy to have to pause to get him out of the way.
My Buffy fandom just poked out, or just came through, because you said you were talking about Spike fighting with her, and I got all excited. But you will find out as we continue through this, I am a Spike fan.
Okay.
I was always more Team Spike than Team Angel. So.
All right. Well, we're going to be very similar on that path.
Oh, well, that works. Let's see. They finally get the tape turned around and play the bat sonar, and then Buffy basically just hacks the she-mantis to pieces with the machete, which you see a silhouette of this on the wall, which is so campy.
But
like
somehow infinitely better than what it would have been had they actually filmed her just like hacking at this giant puppet.
Oh, yes, way better. But it is like the most campy silhouette I've ever seen. It's amazing. And she hacks it to pieces, and he's gone. One part I love about this is that Xander then apologizes.
Yes.
Like, he admits he was wrong.
Just for the record, you were right. I'm an idiot, and God bless you.
Yeah, and that gives him so many points in this. I feel like this is an episode that acknowledges Xander's mistake more than a lot of the episodes. Now, I do feel like there probably should have been another Xander scene before the end of the episode after this. Like, there should have been one more moment with Xander, because it really was a Xander episode, and then, like, you get him hitting the egg sacs at the end, and then there's no more Xander for the rest of the episode. But I do appreciate that they have this moment of him just being like, for the record, I was an idiot, you were right, thank you, just all of that, just laying it out, because it shows that he at least has the ability to learn from his mistakes, even though oftentimes he doesn't.
Or it's not obvious about it.
Yeah. So, a really random thing that I noticed, and I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back in time to the Flutie scene, because like I said, there's a lot in that Flutie scene. But in the Flutie scene with Buffy, where he's talking about Dr. Gregory, and Buffy starts to say...
You mean yesterday in the cafeteria when we found him?
Don't say dead, or decapitated, or decomposing. I'd stay away from D words altogether.
And then, after Buffy slays the she-mantis, Willow and Xander, I don't remember who says what, but they use the descriptors for her as deceased and dissected, which are 2 additional D words.
True. So maybe they did go to counseling. And it just didn't show it.
It's just like, how many D words can we fit into a episode that have to do with somebody being dead? And they got to 5. I think they could have done more. I think obviously,
there's probably more.
Obviously, David Greenwalt fell down on the job there. He should have had that, at least up to like 9 or 10.
Definitely.
And then Willow very casually drops the fact that, it's just so bad that they're like, it's so mean of her to like only go after virgins, and you guys are just doing the smart thing, and it's just, and like Blaine and
both
Xander
like, no.
lose their minds. Blaine especially, like Blaine threatens to sue them level of losing his mind. Which Blaine is just the worst. As much as I can say Xander is the worst, Blaine makes Xander look like just the most lovely, sensitive man you've ever met. But I do like that Willow is like genuinely like, oh, but I think it's sweet. And then Xander picks up the machete and she's like, certainly nothing I'll ever bring up again. Like, what level does she expect this their sensitivity to this fact that they're virgins be at? That she's just like, oh.
And at that point, he moves past her and starts to hack at the egg sacs.
Yeah, and we get another Superfine song. We get Stoner Love by Superfine, which is a song that I don't remember at all. But they do both of the major songs in this. And I will say, just to throw this out there, on our YouTube channel, I have now created a playlist that I'm going to be adding the songs to as we upload each episode of the podcast. So that is a resource that everybody can use to go and listen to some of these Buffy songs that I've been mentioning. I think they're really fun to listen to in full, and I think there's some purposeful choices on some of the songs that you'll pick up if you listen to them in full and really think about the episode as a whole, that I think it's kind of a fun little exercise to do. So I've enjoyed that process so far of working my way through the music as we're working our way through the episodes.
The next scene is Buffy in the Bronze. She's by herself, and Angel comes in, and it's a really cute, flirty scene. Mm-hmm. She tries to give him his jacket back, and he says it looks better on you, and then he walks off and looks back at her, and she watches him go, and then goes, oh boy. Buffy has realized she has a thing for Angel.
To be fair, he is like at maximum smolder in this episode.
Yes, he is. He is. And then we're in the biology classroom, and the new teacher is just a normal teacher, and it's like, all midterm papers will be exactly 6 pages long, no more, no less. And you're like, oh yeah. And you can see Buffy daydreaming, wishing that, she had a better teacher. Which happens a lot to Buffy. Like, the main people in her group don't really get killed a lot. But, like, a lot of times when she starts to make a connection with someone outside the group, they get killed.
Their days are numbered.
This part I don't like.
Okay.
Because Buffy finds Dr. Gregory's glasses and picks them up. This is after the class is over. And she puts them in his coat in the closet. And as she shuts the closet door, the camera pans down to the bottom of the closet where we see another egg sac moving, and it starts to crack.
Yeah.
And the reason I don't like this is because it never goes back to it again. Yeah. Like, we never hear anything about it ever.
This is something similar to, like, Giles feeling like he has to explain who the Master is, which is just a very obvious, like, early Buffy issue where they felt the need to have these weird little cliffhanger bits. And there's a couple of examples, I think, in the first season where they do stuff like this, where they have that little, oh, they might return kind of flourish at the end. To me, I'm very happy that we never had any more encounters with any kind of giant praying mantises. So it doesn't bother me so much that we don't get them again. It may bother me that this is here at all, but at the same time, like, I think that's a pretty typical thing for Monster of the Week type shows, and Buffy at the beginning was very Monster of the Week. I know Supernatural is pretty guilty of doing like a little thing at the end of an episode that's just like a little tease that the threat may not actually be over. And this
interestingly enough, in Buffy, I don't like it. And I didn't like Buffy quite as much when it was one episode Monster of the Week. But I like that part of Supernatural better than I do later when it comes with the giant storylines.
Yeah.
Weirdly. It works for Supernatural. I didn't think it worked for Buffy, but it also could be at what point in the shows I started watching them.
Could be. You're just used to it being a certain way and it kind of changes its stripes.
There's a scene in Buffy season 6 where they do one of those little teaser things at the end. And the episode, I'll talk about it a lot when we get there, but that episode makes me so angry. The way they did the end. Oh,
I think I know what episode you're talking about, and I
probably do.
Love that episode and love the bit at the end.
Really?
Yeah, you're talking about Normal again, right? The one where she's in the...
Yes.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, see, no.
See?
It made me so angry.
See, we can argue about that, and we can agree about Spike. It's all good.
Well, we will definitely have some discussions about that when we get to season 6. We'll have to both explain why we feel that way. That is the end of Teacher's Pet.
Yes. So here's my biggest gripe about Teacher's Pet, as the final thought, is that of all of the weird, over-the-top things that happen in season 1, and there's a lot. There's, living puppets. There's hyena people. There's a lot of stuff that get...
I like the puppet one.
Yeah, that get mentioned on occasion. But for some reason, this show cannot let go of this idea of this giant praying mantis lady that literally, used pheromones to drug Xander into a stupor, and how they continue to hold that against Xander for the rest of the series. This praying mantis lady and Xander's relationship with this praying mantis lady gets referenced so many times throughout the show, and I'm just like...
That's true.
Why? Why is this the weird thing from season 1 that gets held on to?
Right, because, Willow falls in love with a robot demon.
Yeah.
And Buffy gets tricked by several people she attempts to date over the years. It's not just Xander with the praying mantis.
It's one of my biggest gripes about this episode is that the show can't seem to forget about this episode when us as viewers all kind of count this as a pretty forgettable episode. We're all pretty happy to move on from this episode once we're through it, and the show really likes to bring it up.
The show brings up a lot of previous episodes sometimes. There's a lot of references.
Mm-hmm. But here's another counter. Here's another count. I'm going to give you all the counters. Count the number of times that they reference the she-mantis, because I bet it's a lot.
Okay. We can do that. I wonder by the end of this how many Buffy counters we're going to have. I'm actually making a list in my phone right now so that we will be able to keep track.
It's going to be real dumb.
Yeah, but it'll be fun.
All right, with that is our discussion of Teacher's Pet, which is episode 4 of season 1. We'll be back again next week to discuss... I am not looking up anything. You do not... Never kill a boy on the first date. You knew it.
I knew it.
Never kill a boy on the first date. We will be discussing in next week's episode, and we thank you so much for listening.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.